Washington's garden beautifully captures the mindset of early colonial America. His house faces west, with its back to Britain, and his gardens and landscape are fiercely patriotic, using many native species taken from the woodland on his wider estate. By combining useful and ornamental plants, it embodies Republican ideals such as independence and practical simplicity. Behind me is our replica of George Washington's upper garden, which was built in 1962, the year after the museum opened. Recent archaeological research carried out at the real Mt Vernon, Virginia, has revealed a different layout to what we have now. So we are updating our replica to more closely reflect these changes and create a more authentic representation of the upper garden in 1799, the year of George Washington's death. In practice, this means we will be removing the current planting beds. The 5 crescent beds will be replaced with a large single bed that will feature a wide ornamental border around the outside with rows of vegetables on the inside. Our parterre, which was a Victorian interpretation, will be replaced by 4 equally sized beds featuring a boxwood fleur-de-lis motif. And this is a nod to the Marquis de Lafayette, a Frenchman who helped Washington fight the British during the War of Independence and who became a lifelong friend of the general. The plants chosen would have been available to Washington at the end of the 18th century. Roses, viburnums and Californian allspice, along with perennials and annuals such as sunflowers, rudbeckias, larkspur, aster and nigella. In the middle of this bed, there will be rows of fruit and vegetables. This reflects the importance of maintaining as much productive land as possible during a time when large estates like Mt Vernon would have been self-sufficient. Self-sufficiency was really important at the end of the 18th century, and even though that this garden represented George Washington's showcase, he still had to have a productive element to it. Gardens naturally mature and decline, and since our replica is now over 50 years old, it is in need of repair and renovation.
One of the reasons why we're doing the restoration now is that the garden had fallen into quite bad disrepair, and much of that was due to water ingress from the many natural springs on the site, and also ground movement had meant that the wall had shifted and needed to be rebuilt. We're actually on a landform with many natural springs, and that creates a real challenge for any works at the American Museum, particularly in the landscape.
George Washington built a number of octagonal garden houses at Mt Vernon, which were thought to contain seeds and garden tools. My brother Matthew Cannell, who's a highly skilled joiner and boat builder, has completely rebuilt our seed hut, replacing the one built here in 1962. According to Matt, the most challenging part was building the roof, which has a reverse ogee design. He used a boat building technique called lofting to produce a full-scale drawing of the roof in order to get the correct shape for each rafter. Each one features multiple compound angles to make them all sit correctly into a central octagonal block. The timber cladding was also an interesting challenge. It features beveled edges and a rusticated paint finish to give it the appearance of stone. George Washington was hugely passionate about his garden and his estate. When at last he was able to return home in 1797 after his second term as president, he wrote, "That I am now seated in the shade of my own vine and fig tree, and shall devote the remainder of a life nearly worn out to such agricultural and rural amusements as will afford employment for myself." He looked to his garden to finally find peace, tranquility, and repose.